Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're going to be getting started for our presentations today and our discussion for our next webinar in our series. So I want to first introduce myself. My name is Christina Bain, and I'm the Director of the Initiative on Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery here at Babson College in the USA. And we are thrilled to welcome you today to our second conversation in our new series on new technologies, innovation, and entrepreneurship in combating human trafficking and modern slavery. And this is our third series that we've partnered with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and our other partners, Denton's LLP and the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center at TRAC at George Mason University. And again, thank you for joining us. I just want to go over a couple of technical points regarding the webinar and some of the procedures that we're going to have. So we're going to be having about an hour of presentations from our dynamic speakers. We have a really exciting panel lined up for you to discuss our topic today, how are new technologies detecting labor trafficking and exploitation. And then we're going to go into about an hour of discussion. And in order to participate in the discussion, if you could start sending in your questions to our text chat box, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom corner, and you'll be able to text any questions to us. We'll be monitoring that box. I'll be working with the moderator on that. And if you have any challenges or concerns or technical issues, please also chat with us in that box. You can chat with the host, and you can chat with also some of the individual presenters, so you'll have that option. So let us know if you're having trouble, if you can't hear, if your audio goes down, or if anything is going on that you're not able to fully participate in our discussion today. In addition, for those of you who are on the phone, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. We have some participants who are on the line participating via computer audio, but also on the phone line. So if you're not speaking, in order to hear the presentations effectively, if you could mute your microphone, and you'll see that icon next to your name in the upper right-hand portion of the screen on the right-hand side. So with that, I am now going to first, I want to thank our very special sponsor, Denton's US LLP, who has been our sponsors really since the beginning of the series on human trafficking and modern slavery, this webinar series. And Denton's is the largest global law firm, and you can look for more information on their website, www.dentons.com. And they are doing tremendous work combating human trafficking and modern slavery in all forms. And you can see the information on our partnership with Denton's online on their website, and also some of the other collaborations that they're doing not only here in the United States, but with organizations in Canada and globally. They have a tremendous network of stakeholders around the globe, and they're very committed and dedicated to doing this work. So we're so grateful for their support on this webinar series. I also want to thank the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center at George Mason University, and their work is exceptional. I work very closely with Dr. Louise Shelley and Casey Crenard there, and they've been tremendous supporters doing outreach for this webinar series. So we want to thank them and for all the great work that they do in the field in fighting issues related to illicit trade, organized crime, and human trafficking. And now I want to tell you a bit about our program on human trafficking and modern slavery. So here at Babson, we began this program in 2013, and the mission of the program was to bring together the most entrepreneurial minds, students and business leaders, corporate NGO and governmental partners, and other activists from around the globe to really look and innovate and network around the issue of advancing human freedom. We have a number of programs that are emerging from this work, and some of the work that we're doing is in the classroom. We have a robust human rights curriculum here at Babson, and we incorporate work around human trafficking and modern slavery into those classroom approaches. We also have strong partnerships with anti-trafficking organizations like Made by Survivors, which you'll see the picture of them on the right-hand side of the slide, and working to engage students in action-oriented approaches in training the next generation of business leaders in the fight against human trafficking and modern slavery. We've also started a brand new program in high schools and secondary schools here in the United States in the Boston area, training next generation business leaders at that level in terms of how they can create a business and solve human trafficking, and giving them the resources they need to go on and start their business so they can really leverage their brand new expertise in the global fight against trafficking. We're also doing research on different areas related to human trafficking and also different public policy initiatives. So for more information, including more information on this webinar series, our website is www.babson.edu, IHTMS, and so look for us there and see some of our updated events and information. So now, just before I introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to say that this is, again, the third series that we've partnered on issues related to human trafficking, illicit trade, and organized crime, and really looking at what the private sector is doing to address human trafficking. This series that we have, and we're going to be having one webinar once a month up until May, is addressing specifically how technology is not only influencing this crime, but also how it's being used to address it. And I'm just so excited about this series because I've been working on technology-related issues and I worked on it in my previous life when I ran a program at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I'm now working on it at a program at the Harvard Law School. So I'm just very excited to partner with the Global Initiative and Denton's and the Terrorism, Transnational Crime, and Corruption Center on this issue. And with that, I now want to introduce Livia Wagner, who is going to be talking about the Global Initiative Against Transnational Crime and talking about their exceptional work in the field. Livia is the private sector advisor and coordinating all of this work with the Global Initiative. So Livia, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. I'm very happy. Thank you very much, Christina, for this introduction, and I'm very happy to have such great speakers on the panel today. I'm just going to quickly say a few words about the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. So can everyone see that I'm moving the slides? I hope so. Well, the Global Initiative is a network of prominent law enforcement and governance and development experts from different areas, seeking new strategies to find responses to organized crime. And the genesis of the Global Initiative is that the GI was conceived after a series of closed forum discussions with experts from the different areas that I mentioned, and they were calling for a new network as the strategies against transnational organized crime didn't seem so coordinated. So that's why a new tool was necessary for more a strategic approach to counter organized crime. And the objectives of the GI are threefold. Firstly, it's strategic. That means we want to promote a more effective joined-up response to organized crime. Analytical, that means we want to raise awareness and also open the debate on the nature and the extent of organized crime, but also to be responsive. That means we want to serve as a resource to partners with national and regional and international players and stakeholders. And we have different areas that we're covering, different forms of organized crime, which you can see here, which is ranging from arms trafficking, cybercrime, drug trafficking, environmental crime, money laundering, human trafficking, and piracy. Today we're talking about human trafficking, and this is also the area that we're mostly covering with the Respect Initiative. Some activities that we're working on at the GI is, as I mentioned, the Respect Initiative, which is a private sector platform for businesses tackling human trafficking. And part of this is also the webinar series. But we also do have a development dialogue for catalyzing development responses, but also strengthening the research and policy across West Africa, the Sahel, and North Africa and East Africa region. Environmental crime is also a very important issue for us, as well as cybercrime, especially in the BRICS countries. We also do have a very strong focus on reaching out. That means we have a resource library you can find on our website. We have more than 120,000 documents accessible, covering all the different forms of organized crime. And the human trafficking part of our GI activities, you can see here a few publications, and then the one in the middle is the webinar report of the last series of webinars. Then we had one on organized crime and illegal mining in Latin America, also covering human trafficking for labor exploitation and sexual exploitation. So as you can see, we have a series of different activities, and we're very happy to have the webinar series and having more and more participants, and hope you enjoyed this webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Livia, and thank you for your partnership on these issues, and your work is truly extraordinary. And Livia mentioned the Respect Initiative, and I just want to talk briefly about that. So this webinar series is part of this initiative, and it stands for the Responsible and Ethical Private Sector Coalition Against Trafficking. This is something that we've launched together with Batson and the Global Initiative, and you're going to be hearing more about that shortly. We're launching a web platform and other activities that have come about from the conversations and the really rich and diverse discussions that we've had through this webinar series. So we're going to be communicating with you more about that in the coming years. So thank you, Livia, for your work together on this. In addition, I wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar today, so we will be sharing this with you so you have it, so you can review and also share with your networks. And the recording will be a snapshot of exactly what you see on the screen, including the PowerPoint presentation, so you'll have all of that information, and we'll get that to you as soon as we have it finished. And now I want to introduce our moderator today, Samir Goswami, who is a longtime colleague of mine in the field, and we're so excited that he can join us to moderate this session today. I can think of no better person to really moderate this. And he is a human rights and business consultant. He has his own LLC, Samir Goswami LLC, and he has been working on issues related to human trafficking now for a number of years. And he's currently a strategy consultant working with nonprofits and social enterprises with clients that include the United Way, Humanity United, Isra Institute, and Mobile Accord, which is a B corporation. Previously, he was the director of government professional solutions at LexisNexis, where he's done so much incredible work looking at labor abuses in supply chains and also promoting the rule of law and economic advancement. He's also done extensive work, I just want to say, on the demand issue and looking at the demand for sex trafficking, and that's actually where I first started seeing his work and getting an understanding of some of the work that he has been focusing on, specifically related to combating this demand side approach in about 10 years ago, and he was really on the cutting edge of this work, working out in Chicago. And I just want to commend him for being such a leader in the field on this. So in addition to the other bullet points that you see up there about his background, he's had a number of opinion pieces that have also been published in The Guardian, the San Francisco Chronicle, and CNN.com, World Affairs Journal, and other outlets. He's also been the recipient of numerous awards, including 40 Who Have Made a Difference by Business and Professional People for the Public Interest, and also the Impact Award by the Chicago Foundation for Women. So welcome, Samir, and thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. That was a very nice introduction. I think I'll forego the video because you probably won't get a better picture of me than that one up there. So if that's all right, we'll just go with that and save some bandwidth. Hello, everybody, wherever you may be, and for those who are going to be listening later on the cast. Thank you, Babson. Thank you to Global Initiative, Denton, and Track, and other hosts for organizing this. As Christina mentioned, I was a corporate social responsibility and then a sales director at a large multinational company. Part of my job was to devise a system to get information about labor issues in supply chains for one of our due diligence products. I was also once the managing director of a crisis response unit at Amnesty International USA. And many of the cases that we monitored or campaigned on had to do with corporate irresponsibility. Early in my career, I worked directly with survivors of human trafficking, which taught me a lot about their experiences. And currently, I am a consultant on technology and human trafficking issues, and my past and current clients have included United Way Worldwide, Humanity United, ISRA Institute, and we're going to hear from Lisa today from ISRA. Last year, I also authored a report for ISRA called Technology to Address Human Trafficking and Forced Labor in Supply Chains, where we looked at some of the exciting developers in this space and overall at the state of the industry. As you all know and can imagine, supply chains of multinational corporations are very complicated. They have multiple layers. They span many countries, and they have often dozens, if not hundreds, of suppliers. We also know from undeniable data collected by government bodies, NGOs, academics, et cetera, that there is child labor, human trafficking, and other forms of exploitation that impacts the goods that we consume from these corporations. The International Labor Organization estimates that there are probably over 21 or so million people involved in forced labor around the world, and the U.S. Department of Labor estimates that there are probably about 139 goods in 75 countries that could be made by forced or child labor. I think the question then is, what do we do about it? And what do companies do to ensure that their suppliers are not engaging in such nefarious activity? First we have to find out about it, which can be considered a complicated endeavor. And it probably was a much more complicated endeavor until about 10 or so years ago. Back then, you'd have to rely on your suppliers to assure you that they are operating well and treating their workers well, or you'd have to send someone down to a facility, with a clipboard to go talk to workers and to monitor suppliers directly, or you could subscribe to some online platforms that monitor news reports and open source court filings, et cetera, to see if any kind of a negative article or something pops up in any publication around the world about one of your suppliers. That said, it's been clear all along that who better to tell us about how workers are being treated in a factory, a farm, a fishing vessel, or a mine than the workers themselves. They really are the best primary source of information about their worker experiences, about their labor conditions. But workers are all over the world. They're often in hard-to-reach areas. Not only can they be hard to get to, but sometimes you don't know where to look. There are safety and security concerns for researchers, who go out to talk to workers and the workers themselves participating in an in-person survey. And it can also be pretty expensive to send someone out to a remote area or even an urban area to collect data directly from a worker. And then also, how do you get to millions of such workers or even a representative sample to get an honest look at what their firsthand experiences are? Luckily, what we have seen in the past 5 or so years, I'd say, are some really amazing entrepreneurs who have applied and developed technology in very interesting ways to get to these workers. We've seen experts mine large open source data sets to find patterns, to identify dubious suppliers. We've seen the utilization of mobile phones and smartphone apps to survey workers directly by SMS and ask them, what they're experiencing. We've also seen the establishment of hotlines, so workers can call if they have concerns, and then that data gets aggregated and presented to decision makers. And we've even seen some, very, very innovative social media analysis from worker communities to find out about and verify conditions. And there are many other technology-enabled approaches that we've seen, and we're going to hear from some really good ones today. Generally speaking, the focus is on how do we bring the voices of the workers to the corporate boardroom where supplier decisions are made. That is when a company is conducting their due diligence on whether and how they should work with a supplier or renew their contract with a supplier. They should also have information about the supplier's labor practices, as told by the workers themselves. That data should also inform their decision-making and be a factor in their decision-making. And our very good panelists today will tell us more about their work in this space and how they bridge that gap. I think one final thought before I turn it over to our first panelist. I would say that, a few years ago, as some of these technology applications were emerging, and there were many, brilliant technologists who were working then with service providers and on-the-ground folks on using this technology wisely, many of us thought that if we could just bridge this information gap, that is, provide actionable data, preferably sourced from workers themselves, then corporations would act upon it. They would hear directly from a worker or group of workers that this is happening in their supply chain, and they would act upon it. While there are many examples of that happening, there are also many examples of that not happening. So while there are really some very interesting and exciting developments of how technology is being used in the space at a very affordable price point as well, we still need to continue to build that political will that data is indeed acted upon, because at the end of the day, you have a worker who is experiencing something that is not very positive or could not be very positive, and they're taking the time and probably taking some risk to share their stories with us. So we owe it to them to use our technology wisely and continue to build that political will that their stories are indeed acted upon. With that, a couple things before we start. One is just to remind you that if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function and send them over to us, and Christina will compile them, and we'll pose them to the speakers after they're done with their introductory remarks. With that, I'm going to introduce Antoine, our first speaker. Antoine is he's the founder and president of Alula. It's a platform that engages workers and suppliers. Alula was a finalist for the Partnership for Freedom Rethink Supply Chain Challenge for the very innovative work that they are doing in using technology to identify labor issues. And I think they really are pushing the boundaries of what we can do with technology in this space. You can say many flattering things about Antoine, and you can read about him if you Google him, and also on the screen for his very impressive career. I'm just going to add that he's truly a global citizen with an academic and professional experience in France, the US, and Australia, and Alula has projects in many parts of the world. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Antoine.
Thanks for the generous introduction, Samir. I hope you can now see the presentations and stop me if that's not the case. Yeah, I think so. I also want to thank all the organizers and sponsors for this webinar and the opportunity to share our work with you today. I think I wanted to start by setting the scene, but I think Samir has done a very good job at explaining the scale and magnitude of the problem. Our starting point, with Alula, which I started now 3.5 years ago, is really trying to leverage the ubiquity of mobile phones to connect directly with workers in order to create more transparent and responsible supply chains. And with over 4 billion unique mobile users in the world, that gives us an incredible opportunity to really connect in a way that wasn't the case. And here we're really talking about unique users. I want to emphasize that, not just connections, so that we can really go further in last mile areas to understand what actually goes on in the supply chain. And we see really, I think, a change a changing scene, I think, with respect to the need for more worker voice in the ways the social performance of companies and the enforcement of social regulations is conducted. Clearly, there is a number of regulations that I think is pushing the boundaries for greater disclosures on non-financial performance in the EU, the UK, and the US, as well as in other national settings. And that's also, I think, convergent with more consumer demand from the millennials, asking, who are not only saying that they're interested in shopping ethically, but are also prepared to pay. So there's a convergence of that, and I think on the other end, as the recent reports from Amnesty on palm oil or on cobalt earlier last year, and I think that the most recent documentary that came out on Channel 4 in the UK regarding the conditions of workers in Leicester, they show the global phenomenon that we are trying to tackle, and its ubiquity. It's not just something that happens in emerging markets, something that really is unfortunately ubiquitous. So, trying to explain you what it is that we do. So basically, there are 3 steps to understand how we're trying to really, tackle human trafficking and improve labor conditions across supply chain. First, I mean, we've connected with, hundreds of mobile operators around the world in order to engage with workers in their own terms through SMS, through voice, social media, and USSD, which has, I think, very interesting features because it really provides a higher level of anonymity for respondents, so that we don't even need them to go into an app. We just meet them according to their terms, and if they are illiterate, they can get a phone call, and really their voice can be heard, which is it's really central to what we're doing. Second, is the way we engage with them is not just extracting information, but it's really trying to define a two-way relationship where they can be their awareness about the problem can be enhanced so that they don't fall into the traps of recruiters or other very dodgy characters. We also enable them to really have an open feedback to corporations or to intermediaries that are working on to tackle these issues, and we also do more structured surveys to do that. And the point is that we transform all of that into metrics that are updated, in real time, so that we can create early warnings for corporations, for NGOs, for governments about what actually is happening on the ground, and to really, drive different decision making. I think one thing that is important to emphasize is Alula is fundamentally a software and analytics company. I mean, we are just a tool. It's which is a very humbling approach. I used to work in in advocacy and being in trenches in taking action. Here, our mission is really to try to empower the thousands of organizations that are interested in these issues and give them a tool that is really flexible and global, so that they address their needs. We are not. I mean, I think to go back to Samir's point, we're not responding per se to the cases. We're really trying to give a voice to the organizations in the field that do that. In practice, as I said, I think there are 4 things that we do. We send surveys. We can send information about human trafficking, and we try to make people aware of what's going on. We enable grievances to be anonymously and continuously submitted to us, and turn that into analytics. Now, let me give you 2 examples of applications that are relevant to forced labor and more serious cases of human trafficking. One, I think, is really centered around the idea of how do we measure the problem first, and in order first then to take action. So we run mass surveys with workers, women, other vulnerable populations around the world, and we do that remotely. We have a number of automated processes to reach out to workers when brands contract us or other organizations are interested in our services to really understand what is going on in these locations. And that can be done, typically that's done through interactive voice response, because the population that we're trying to reach are often illiterate, or the questionnaires that we run are long enough that they require oral rather than SMS capabilities. And so they go through these questionnaires, and they are fairly simple and straightforward. Here just have a few sample of questions, and they are based on international standards, and only require respondents to say 1, 2, 3, yes, no, or don't know to these questions to do that. Why we think it can be a really great source of information is that, unlike audits, we can really do that at higher frequency, so we can capture seasonality and changing conditions, and we do that with larger numbers, not 10 or 20 workers. And third, we do that really in when the workers want, and obviously when they consent to doing that, so that we really get more honest feedback at the end of the day, and we feel that that's the basis for better understanding and action from companies or other stakeholders in the chain. And all of that, I think, is basically how do we get to drive action is, we've created a series of dashboards that simply, try to look at the risk from, on a very simple 1 to 10 scale to really enable someone who is sitting in corporate level to see that, there is a flag that's coming to them and to be able to investigate further or to triangulate it with some of the other sources of information that they have. And not just looking at aggregate performance, but also looking at, whether the problems are coming from, non-payment of wages or, physical punishment, other forms of or proxies of modern slavery, and other key issues in the chain. The second example I wanted to share with you has to do with, I think it's going beyond that and trying to see whether we can use mobile phones to provide some solutions to these problems. And with the prize that we won in the Partnership for Freedom, we've really started designing solutions for human trafficking in the mining sector, illegal mining sector in Moderator in Peru, where what we found in the field is that there are a number of issues obviously that are really pervasive, but one is the fact that there is a recruitment of young people specifically that are feeding the beast of human trafficking, because there is a lack of awareness of the problem and the rights and what it means to be working in these conditions. And two, there is a very difficult, it's highly dangerous and difficult to be working in this field, to support potential victims, to conduct rescue operations, and then to follow up with victims. And that's where our solution, we feel, can really do a great job in preventing, in helping to prevent, rescue, and remedy the problem. So to give you a couple of examples, not reading all the slides of what we can do with that is we can send mass broadcast SMS to students that to really help them become more aware of the problems and change their behavior or become more informed citizens that will make better decisions about whether to engage in such activities. We can send them alerts as well when problems arise and help them help them avoid the usual pitfalls. We've been, working with a number of organizations directly in the field to help debug, help them get more specific information about the cases and lead rescue operation in a much more safe manner, because informants and collaborators can operate with USSD protocols that do not leave any record on the phone specifically, and can as a result work more effectively. Following rescue, we also feel that the case management systems that we have can enable some of the agencies also on the government side to follow up with the victims beyond just the short period when there is physical presence, and really understand what are the long-term effects and traumas that may be resulting from that, and trying to understand whether there is relapse or not, because a number of victims, as we know, tend to go back to these locations, which is very unfortunate. So we're trying to have long-term impact on whether the victims of human trafficking keep falling back into these conditions, or whether they can really become free and engage in other more other activities. So it's just two examples of the things that we do. As I said, we've really tried to develop a modular system to try to measure the problem and help organizations manage it. And the only way it works is if when we are partnering not just with one kind of organizations, with a range of stakeholders. So I'm looking forward to your questions and to the discussion. Thanks. I don't think we can hear you.
No. Thank you, Antoine. Really appreciate that. Very good overview of the work that you do, the innovative work that you do. And I think aside from all the good information, you probably have one of the coolest logos and names that I've seen in the tech space. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to now, please do send in your questions by the chat function. There's, I think, quite a few people on this webinar, and we're really looking for some good questions. Please do that. It is now with great pleasure that I've introduced David. David is truly a tech entrepreneur. He seems pretty young to me from that picture, but he does have a 24-year track record of identifying disruptive products and building investment teams and companies to develop them. David is going to tell us more about Blue Line Grid, which is a mobile technology-enabled secure collaboration platform, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. I think one thing that we struggle with in this space is assuring the privacy and data security of the workers that we collect information from. So his work is very relevant in this space, as is his very great experience. He has started 2 venture-backed companies and has held executive leadership experience and has held executive leadership positions at big companies like Kroll, Marsh & McLennan, and Travelers. So thank you, David, for joining us, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, thanks a lot. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you,
okay,
David.
Great. Thanks. Just checking. There was a problem before. Great. Well, thanks for the kind introduction. My whole career has been spent on leveraging technology for analyzing risk around identities and transactions. So similar to you, Samir, my work was actually building a lot of the databases that you were leveraging at LexisNexis and in your work. At Kroll, I had built a data business that was analyzing vendor and supplier relationships, not only for supplier issues like human trafficking and labor disputes, but also bribery and other things that could potentially be evidence of other types of disruptions that could occur in the future. Blue Line Grid was born in 2013 out of that work that I'd done at Kroll, and looking at large volumes of data and trying to analyze problems, creating a sieve in the internet to drive data through to identify, needles and haystacks around issues. We saw a major challenge with regards to how do you share that information, both with one client as well as with an entire supply chain. My co-founder in the business was Commissioner Bill Bratton. He had left as chief of police in Los Angeles and was working in the private sector prior to going back to be police chief in New York. And we really saw a great need to solving a key problem with interoperability, how agencies share information securely. The business today serves not only law enforcement, but also global intelligence agencies and the private sector. The U.S. government agencies like Department of Homeland Security, the FBI call us the last mile. And that is, how do you connect to local resources? We do not connect individual workers. For us, it's about how a police officer that pulls over a car and has suspicion, of an individual that's in a car or enters a building, shares that information quickly. So today we're being used in many different situations for human trafficking task force that include, again, federal agencies like the U.S. Coast Guard, as well as international agencies. That solves a big problem of how do I trust the people that I'm sharing information with that are part of my task force. For us, it's about leveraging existing technology, a mobile device or a web browser to gain greater situational awareness for investigations and intelligence. The application is about advanced mass notification by location. So I have suspicion of activity in a certain area. I want to get all my resources. And that's not just law enforcement. I could have regional partners with social services, with other types of agencies that I want to connect quickly. And I want to send them a notification to quickly get them connected. That's encrypted in an application, that's SMS, that's text to voice, or even clicking a button and having an instant conference call. Once that happens, I want to pull people into a secure group. I want to share information, imagery, video, again, task force work about an investigation. I want to share files. And then, obviously, it has to be compliant, secure, and I want to move all of that information into an existing records management system or other type of document repository that my agency, whether it be, again, Coast Guard investigations or Los Angeles Police Department, where it's safe, secure, and filed for, ultimately, for evidence in an investigation. The other big part about our business is rather than just focusing on technology, we really wanted to have a true global network. This is a snapshot of the United States, and today we are the outreach platform for 42 of 78 fusion centers. These are collaborative entities that were born after 9/11 that are combinations of federal, U.S., state, and local money that basically facilitates collaboration in regional areas. There's 78 because several states, you can see California, has 5 of these centers, and that would connect all, so each one of them connects all state, local resources, all police officers, first responders, even government agencies like district attorneys' offices and others, as well as private sector security. Our work, just to give you an example of how this works, it's for many different purposes, not just investigations around human trafficking, but even for the Super Bowl, where there are task forces put together to try to track people coming into town, for trafficking purposes. Private sector security plays a big role in that for hotel security, as well as corporations like Intel, Facebook, Intuit that are in the region. They want to quickly be able to get a be on the lookout alert with an image and other types of risks that are going on. So today, again, we're doing this in 42 of these 78 centers, and quickly by 2017 plan to be in all 78. We do work with foreign governments. The image of Mexico was blacked out inadvertently, but for the government of Mexico, it's similar. We're connecting ultimately all agencies in Mexico for a similar purpose. How do they share information effectively on a trusted network? And increasingly looking to do the same thing in Southeast Asia and in the EU. So just quickly, I couldn't share real information, so this is just this is a real case, but this is not coming through one of our partners. But just to show the value of our platform, it allows agents to, again, to create a geofence from a mobile device or a web browser, to send a mass notification, to share images, be on the lookout type information, or as you can see on the right, is similar to WhatsApp or WeChat or other types of encrypted mass group communication. We have a compliance system that not only is encrypted and secure, but also facilitates the ability to have data retention policies and all the other things. Human trafficking for us has always been part of the DNA of our business. We saw it as an early use case when ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence in the United States, and the White House under the Obama administration were very focused on this issue and reached out to try to figure out how to share information rapidly around, between disparate agencies. Samir, you had talked about the complexity of politics in this area, and ultimately, the end game for that never came out as far as a national program. But for us, we are today, as I mentioned, solving it every day on a local level as well as with individual federal agencies. So that's it for my prepared remarks, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That was very informative, and just to put it very bluntly, there's a rapid increase in data that we're collecting that pertains to supply chains, including very sensitive data from workers themselves, and how can you aggregate that and provide that securely to supply chain managers, et cetera. It's a great challenge that you guys are clearly solving in other spaces as well. So thank you for that. Just another reminder, everyone, please do send in your questions. We have some great panelists, and I'm sure you all have very good questions to ask of them. It's now my pleasure to introduce our last but not least panelist, Dr. Lisa Rende-Taylor, who is in Thailand, I'm assuming, and it's very late there. So thank you for staying up late to be with us. I have known Lisa for many years, starting from when she was the Chief Technical Advisor for the United Nations Interagency Project on Human Trafficking, or UNIEP as we used to call it. She is currently the founder and executive director of the ISRA Institute, which is a Thailand-based NGO that I think is really pioneering some very innovative technology and programming to bring together multiple stakeholders to address forced labor and human trafficking in very high-risk industries and very complicated supply chains. She has a very, very impressive 20-year career, but I must say that what impresses me the most on a personal level is that even though she's very comfortable appearing on CNN or negotiating with business executives in corporate boardrooms. I think deep down she really prefers to spend her time with workers in their communities and really find innovative ways to elevate their voices and their stories. So Lisa, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thanks, Samir, for having me. It's nice joining everyone here from Thailand, and thanks to Babson and Denton's and Global Initiative as well. So I'll just go over a few things about ITSER Institute. I think it's nice joining my colleagues on the panel. I think that we're all trying to work towards some very similar objectives and working at it in our different ways, kind of, you know, trying to come at it from our strengths. And for us at ITSER Institute, as you mentioned before, we are a not-for-profit organization. We're basically a U.S. nonprofit and also a Thai-registered nonprofit. And we're trying to use our position on the ground to basically advance work on labor issues and anti-trafficking issues, you know, if you want to look at it from that way, but also trying to advance and evolve how businesses do responsible sourcing and ethical sourcing as well. So for us, being based in Southeast Asia and having worked on these issues for quite some time, I think that for the, you know, past, I don't know, 15 or 20 years that we've been working on labor issues, for the majority of that time, we have not seen those issues from the context of being within global supply chains, and complex global supply chains is that, you know, 4, 5, 6 tiers deep, and sometimes, you know, with some different product lines. We kind of dealt with it in terms of, you know, there's sweatshops, there's problems, maybe we can get the authorities to, you know, put their attention on it and do raids and rescues and so on. And so the anti-trafficking response in the region or on the ground, and I think this is not just in Southeast Asia, but it really has not been scalable, and it has also led to a lot of different harms being done to vulnerable populations, exploited migrant workers, and trafficking victims in the name of anti-trafficking. And so when ITSER Institute started in 2014, it was actually a bunch of us who essentially left the UN to be able to do, again, some multi-stakeholder work and collaboration, you know, to build a sense of solidarity around these issues, but in a way that we could engage the private sector in exactly the same level that we were engaging other different, you know, stakeholders as well. I think that we saw a lot of possibilities in working with the private sector, particularly because I think that we also saw a lot of the limitations that, you know, in the UN and NGOs, there's a lot of work focusing on, you know, essentially the raids and the rescues and the rehabilitation and so on. So for our position, our team is basically, we are a range of folks who coming from human trafficking, you know, we have some business consulting folks, value chains, technology, data analytics. I'm myself a quantitative scientist from my background. And together we want to use our labor expertise in business intelligence, but most importantly our position on the ground to help basically businesses take advantage of what we see as a great opportunity for all of us in the future, which is the fact that the migrant workers who are working in these complex supply chains across a range of different tiers that are geographically dispersed have smartphones, they're using smartphones, and if we can figure out how to tap into and incredibly and rigorously analyze this data in a way that we can also empower workers as well, we think that there's a great potential to increase the visibility of labor and social risk for businesses across these complex supply chains, but at the same time being on the ground and knowing where there's problems. I think, you know, we've got enough focus on problems. In 2017, we think we need to kind of work on solutions as well. So if we're on the ground, if we've got folks who are labor experts, we have, you know, Cambodians, Burmese, Lao, Thai on our team, as well as, you know, folks from outside of Asia, there's a great opportunity to be able to work with suppliers to strengthen the way that they're recruiting and the way that they're kind of treating and managing their workers in a way that we see as being really scalable. You know, when you see problems and then it goes down the road of, you know, raid or rescue or things like that, what we're basically saying is that we're not going to try to work with these suppliers to give them a chance to improve. And because we've worked with a lot of the local businesses on the ground, we have been able to see firsthand a lot of the reasons why there are labor risks. And it's not like all these folks are bad guys. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you hear about Thailand and the seafood industry and fishing industry and all that that, you know, makes it sound like there are some very systemic and pervasive labor issues on the ground, which there certainly are. But when you get down to the firm level, there are a lot of informalities and lack of understanding and, you know, a lack of capacity and so on that we can work on such that you can work with these businesses to transform them into, you know, places where there's a lot of labor risk to, you know, decent working conditions and, you know, strengthen relations between the workers and the management. And once you have that within complex supply chains, there's a knock-on effect within the rest of the supply chain as well. Some really kind of, you know, positive will on the part of businesses and within industries to see that worker voice is not necessarily a scary thing, that it is something that can actually be quite a positive thing. You know, not just for these individual firms, but for industries and at a national level as well. For us, we have 3 interrelated core program areas, and this, again, it kind of comes from us with our roots being basically a bunch of nerds from the UN who are really into data and labor, who also wanted to, you know, work on some really strategic and meaningful partnerships. So we're all driven by our units that we call ITSERA Labs, where we're working on the data analytics and technology focusing on worker voice. And in having these connections with worker communities on the ground, which, I mean, basically we're kind of carrying over from what we developed in the earlier days in the UN. So, for example, we have a hotline that's been running, multilingual hotline, that's been running for almost 9 years. And then from that, as technology has evolved, developing, you know, different social media messaging through, you know, Facebook. And we have these apps called Line and Viber, which is basically what folks, you know, they use WhatsApp in places like the United States, that has essentially led to our being in touch with tens and tens of thousands of workers at any given time in a way where we are kind of hearing where sort of the red flags and hotspot areas are within the supply chains of our partners. So the other key part of our program is, if you see on this slide in the bottom right corner, we have a strategic partners program. And this is one where we are engaging global brands and retailers to join in partnership with us. And in doing that, what they essentially do is they share their confidential supply chain information with us. And we absolutely protect this information with our lives. It's obviously very kind of serious to them, and it's very serious to us as well, but it's a great opportunity because if we know who our partners' suppliers are, then we can look within our databases and, you know, all of our intelligence to see where the red flags are popping up through all of these different thousands of communications that we're getting with migrant workers. And if we can find areas where there are issues, we can go down to the supplier and essentially be able to provide them with, it's essentially free business advisory services to help them work through what some of these issues are. And obviously you can imagine that it helps having their customers standing behind us to say, we really do encourage you to work with ITSERA Institute and to take, you know, this opportunity to work on strengthening some of the weaknesses that you may have in your labor recruitment and management systems. So, so our model is essentially one where we focus on worker voice and empowerment, and that data has to be kind of managed responsibly in a couple of ways. The main kind of point for us, again, is that we didn't, I mean, we're a nonprofit. We didn't develop this technology and these different communication channels initially for the purpose of, you know, helping businesses to transform how they do ethical sourcing. We did it to create tools for the people so that the migrant workers had, you know, access to better information about all the changing rules in the destination country, information in their own language, information on how to interpret their contracts and pay slips, and or maybe even realize that they need to have contracts and pay slips, which oftentimes they don't. And so in creating these tools for the people, we're also creating these very sort of important relationships of trust with workers. And so, you know, if you are, you know, like us, a nonprofit kind of labor organization at heart, when you hear about issues, we have to understand how to respond to them responsibly as well. You know, so, I mean, as kind of Antoine mentioned earlier, we're all kind of working towards the same goals, but from different positions. So for us at ITSERA Institute, you know, we are kind of down there with direct contacts from workers, and when they call us from, you know, whatever province province it is in Thailand and we hear information about issues, we do have to understand how to responsibly respond with information, connect with some of our civil society partners on the ground, work with the local supplier in order to address urgent issues, and when necessary, kind of call on our strategic partners who are the global brands and retailers to create a more kind of encouraging environment for suppliers to respond in case they don't. But, honestly, I mean, it's 95% of the cases that we have out there when there are issues and we contact local suppliers, they, tend to be pretty enthusiastic, and maybe at first they're a little bit kind of worried about what is this whole NGO worker voice thing, about the foreign migrant workers in my factory or fishing fleet that are contacting this NGO. But then I think that when they see what this is all about, I mean, the world is changing. Responsible sourcing is changing. Businesses are changing. Supply chain controls are changing. And, what we're hoping is that we can take the suppliers along in kind of a positive way and not a negative way. And it certainly has been really great having some really good progressive brands and retailers, working with us on that kind of messaging down their supply chain. So our KPIs, I mean, it all kind of started as an experiment in the beginning. When you come from the UN, you end up having a lot of experience in working with and trying to focus on how to get different structures within the government to be more responsive or have a higher capacity. Moving into working with the private sector was a kind of a nice breath of fresh air. In the beginning, they move a heck of a lot faster than we were ever used to before, but it has led to our being able to really test these models to reach a scale that we had never been able to reach through the more quote-unquote traditional anti-trafficking means. We have kind of coverage of and ongoing communications with workers in the tens of thousands, so it is like in the 40s to 50,000s. We're about to launch another app on Sunday, actually, and we're hoping to really kind of boost those numbers from the tens of thousands into the hundreds of thousands and millions, but still, of course, maintaining this kind of meaningful relationship of trust with workers so that we can respond appropriately and in a timely manner when there are issues between us and our networks. Within the first year of our program, we were able to impact the lives of over 5,500 workers that were in very serious labor exploitation situations by, again, not triggering a raid rescue response, but by working with some supply chain leverage and working on some supplier strengthening and turning some, fairly hazardous labor recruitment mechanisms and labor management systems into decent workplaces, which has been really quite rewarding. That means, nobody gets thrown in a shelter, nobody has to go through a harmful court process, no one gets separated from their families, nobody has to stop working for years in order to be part of a court process. The people keep on working, they get paid back what they may have been, cheated or extorted or whatever in the past. And business systems, when they transform, it tends to be permanent. I think that when we can help to strengthen supplier systems on the ground, that we typically don't see them roll back. So the model that we employ, we call inclusive labor monitoring. I guess sometimes it's sort of seen in comparison to audits, which is the way that a lot of businesses have to try to get their information about what's happening in their supply chain. With complex supply chains, of course, I think it's hard to kind of audit all the way through the supply chain and all of the different workplaces that are within a supply chain. And so, again, particularly in Asia, we think that, smartphone technologies are really promising because, for example, for Burmese in Thailand, over 90% of Burmese in Thailand have a smartphone. They use these smartphones multiple times a day. And so inclusive labor monitoring means it's monitoring. It's not point in time. We have ongoing communications from workers. Inclusive means that we are getting data, of course, from the worker voice, and it's a wide range of workers. It's not, designated representatives of workers. It's not, just the most outgoing of workers. Anyone with a phone has a voice, and they're all equal. And so it's been really nice to see the model kind of get built out in that way, particularly when we see some of the very strange ways that worker representation can be corrupted in some of the countries in Asia where there are not strong unions and things like that we have in other parts of the world. Yeah, so again, the key components of our system are, as you can see in the first couple of boxes, is having these strategic partnerships from the beginning. It's been really actually quite awesome working with global brands and retailers as they evolve how they do ethical sourcing. You know, the laws have changed a bit in the United States, you know, with the California Transparency and Supply Chains Act, and in the UK with the Modern Slavery Act recently, and that has basically triggered a change in the level of engagement that global brands and retailers have with how they do ethical sourcing. And so at the same time, when we have, you know, the changes that have happened in the world that have led to results like 90-something% of market workers having phones and being able to use them, the big thing for us is it's not just the identification of issues, but it's the collaboration on the improvements and the corrective actions, which leads to this sort of transformation in labor risks and labor conditions within supply chains. So that's basically us in a nutshell. I think the view from us anyway of the promise of really engaging with businesses in a positive way, we think it's quite promising. I mean, you know, I think that the workers and the technology, everything has kind of started coming together in a really great perfect storm. You know, as we see it in Asia anyway, for the technology that's in the workers' hands, you know, they've already kind of purchased the phones, they're using them, and the laws and the environment around responsible sourcing are changing in a really positive way. So we have very kind of hopeful optimism for the next few years in seeing transformations in responsible sourcing, because the scale that can be achieved of transformation, the number of people that can be touched through working with businesses in this way, I mean, we're talking in the millions. And like the numbers that Antoine put in the beginning about the scale of, you know, human trafficking and forced labor, we've got to start hitting these numbers in the millions, and we see engaging with the private sector as a great way forward in those goals. So thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that, and you know, telling us about how the innovative work you're using, things you're doing to use technology to capture worker voices, but then also how those worker voices are being used to inform solutions, especially in partnership with corporate actors and stakeholders. I also appreciate the positive note you ended on, especially these days. It's a complicated world, so I really appreciate the boost of optimism that we desperately need sometimes in this. Thanks again to Antoine and David as well for your great talks. We have gotten a bunch of questions, but you can still ask more, so please chat away and ask us more questions. And I'm going to pose them to some of our panelists. Some questions are general, some questions are specifically for people, so I will do that. And then we'll do that for a little while, and then I'll turn it back to the panelists just for some concluding remarks. The first question is for Antoine, and it's how does Alula get the app into the hands of the workers, and presumably that it's deeper in the supply chain where many brands do not reach. So I think in a nutshell, it's how do you get your data collection systems into the hands of workers in places that usually we cannot get to.
So basically, one thing I want to reemphasize is, you know, for the moment we are really focusing on SMS and voice, and really, you know, trying to reach the workers through, you know, non-smartphones devices, because it's still some barrier that is changing, but still there. And you could even argue that even when you have a smartphone, there are pretty clear statistics that people tend to prefer being contacted through SMS, for instance. How do we get the you know, we publicize basically the tools through posters and videos that are really simple, that explains the purpose, the anonymity of the service, and have a simple call to action, because in a number of settings, missed calls, for instance, are very embedded in cultural settings, and enable people to recruit themselves into the tool, and then after, you know, go through consent, etc. So that's typically what we do, and we verify whether our materials have been displayed. We have in a number of cases also on the ground partners, be it in, you know, on the NGO side or on the professional services side, to support that. But that we're trying to really add that networks because as Lisa said, we really feel that the scale of the problem is so big that you need to find a system that is highly scalable. So we're really trying to think about how can we do that. And what you find is, participation rates, tend to be, the 10s or 15s in the percentage in the first place. But with that tool, you can go back and survey workers regularly, and you can build the confidence over time. And not only you get better samples, but you also get more honest answers. So because in a number of cases, the first time people may participate, but they may not exactly tell you what's on their mind. So you have to be careful also in how you interpret data, because it can be misleading if you just, you can see a drop between the first cycle and second cycle, and that may not mean much, except that people are starting to open up. So you have to always be careful about how you look at the data.
There's a follow-up question for you on that as well, and that is, when you work with companies and you provide them with this data and this analysis, how have they responded?
So I think it's a very interesting conversation and evolving one. So I feel we've gone from a place where companies looked at worker voice as something that is a good thing to do, to put in annual reports if you want to be a bit cynical for a second. And I think now there is an increasing interest in really thinking about how we're going to integrate that within our risk management practice, and specifically with the audit programs. And I think they do that very differently. Some are just triangulating and saying, okay, I have my audit program and I'm going to in a select number of cases do that, or I am going to use your tool in addition to my audit programs, because there are some places where I'm just not going to have the resources to go. And I think there are some interesting conversations now about how can we possibly embed some of the aspects of our technologies into the audit protocol themselves, because the worker interview specifically is a place that is useful, but is not really data driven, and there are a number of problems with the fact that interviewing 10 or 20 workers on a year, on a couple of years or less is not necessarily going to be a very good form of verification of performance. So I think that's where I see a very interesting potential going forward.
Next question is for Dave, and it's about Mexico, and I'll paraphrase it a little bit. How do you navigate a country such as Mexico where there are complex links between human trafficking, disappearances, and potential law enforcement, public authority? Have you discovered any issues and some complexities in working in that environment in your sharing and collaboration platforms?
Yeah, I'll just make it clear that our work with any government agency is to provide the tools for communication among government entities and private sector security. With regards to how it's used ultimately, we don't have access to how that communication actually rolls out. We can't see it, we're blind to it. So for the instance of Mexico, it's very specific to trust among federal police and local police for many of the reasons that you're saying. I mean, how do you ensure that the person on the other end of sharing information is verified to receive that information? Not everyone's treated equally, right? Just because you're on the platform, you have access to the app doesn't mean you have access to any conversation. You may have access to none. So that's really key for us, and that's the same in the United States. The federal agencies in the United States don't trust state and locals the way that they would trust their own verification processes. And we provide a means for basically allowing people to admit people into different types of conversations based on different thresholds. Some of those thresholds are based on multiple forms of authentication, including biometric, and others are forms based on pattern usage. Are you in the right place? Does that create a potential risk because you say you are somebody that's in a place that that you aren't? And others are pattern usage as a form of authentication. This person doesn't typically talk in these types of not talk, but this doesn't use the application in the way that this person is trying to use it. So that raises red flags. So for us, it's about creating a trust cloud. It's not about monitoring the actual conversations.
David, while we have you unmuted, I have a question. You also have a very good and successful track record of identifying emerging technologies in markets that probably don't even exist yet. And as you look at the landscape of what is out there and how it's being applied in both data sharing and collaboration and data collecting, especially in this space, what gives you hope looking ahead of what more can we do with technologies that exist or technologies that could be being developed as we speak and launched in a couple of years that can really help us elevate worker voice and inform supply chain managers and governments and clean up supply chains?
I think there's two very specific answers to that. One is obviously the fact that 4 years ago the cell phone wasn't ubiquitous. I mean, it's crazy to even think back. When we started the company, we started it with a web application as a minimal viable product because Facebook wasn't even focused on mobile at the time. So all of the statistics that everyone's giving as far as the fact that workers have cell phones is the most promising. Second, with regards to semantic analysis and the ability to drain, again, the internet around social, around different risk factors that are available online, where you can actually put together, risk analysis that could effectively spot trends and even individual bad actors to help narrow law enforcement activities and individual cases of workers. That technology has advanced tremendously. I would caveat the latter to say that the needs for privacy controls, different types of civil liberties to be protected are also advancing dramatically to the point where the use of that type of technology by law enforcement is incredibly limited right now because of the fact that government agencies are very worried about how it is being used. So as technologies advance, we're in a new era, of different types of intelligent analysis. The government also has to keep up and to make sure that there's effective governance and the ability to use the technology effectively. I'd say right now it's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth very quickly. And you see that in foreign governments with the use of even collaborative technologies like WhatsApp. The second WhatsApp released an encrypted version, many governments shut it down, and it swings back and forth very quickly. So, for us, we're navigating this. Obviously, as I said, we are providing it to very special types of users. But in answering your question, it's not just a technology question. It's also about all the policies, both domestic and international, around the use of that technology.
Great, thanks. Thanks for contextualizing that. There's a question that could be for anyone, but also probably Lisa, if you want to tackle this first, and others can jump in. What role/value is there in using commercial satellite imagery to identify issues in supply chain or to confirm reported abuses? The recent use of satellite imagery to confirm slave labor conditions on a fishing vessel seems to indicate that this technology has something to offer in this regard. Lisa, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that, we're all looking forward to a future of, more and more opportunities to use technology to understand how to uncover labor risks. Satellite imagery may be one of them. The one thing that we see from working with workers day to day, having guys on fishing boats calling us, regularly, is that, well, there's a few things. One is it's actually, not so easy to just have a visual and understand, for example, who's in debt bondage. The slavery that really is in a lot of our supply chains is not, the slavery that may be in our memories of, our history books and learning of what happened, what it was like several hundred years ago. People who are in debt bondage, who don't necessarily have, complete control of their freedom of movement, when they're on shore, like, for example, if they work on fishing boats, if they're debt bonded, these kinds of things are not necessarily apparent with satellite imagery. I think that one of the things that we really like about Worker Voice, especially the way that we run it, is that, the workers are contacting us at a time when they have, determined this to be safe to them, in a location that is safe to them. If they're using our app, then they can do anonymous reviews of, how their payment is and how their treatment is and so on, or they can just contact us directly, calling us on the hotline if they want to talk with someone, or contacting us through some other, sort of messaging program. I think that there's a lot of value in being able to kind of communicate directly with workers to understand the nuance of the risk assessments that, that in reality we need to understand what all of the different actors are and players are, all of the mechanisms of control and exploitation before sort of moving forward with any kind of program where you would be getting on the ground, putting workers potentially at risk, accusing businesses of things that they may or may not be, aware of or complicit in or whatever. There's just a lot of caution that we can see. I mean, when you talk about working in the fishing industry, for example, or, even, other things, like these are industries where, people are murdered, they can get murdered, it can get quite serious like that. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of assumptions about what trafficking looks like. And the reality is that there are a lot more kind of invisible forms of coercion and exploitation that we need to kind of modernize our idea of what forced labor really is.
Thanks, and I hats off to you for getting on camera close to midnight in Thailand. Actually, there's a follow-up question with that for you, Lisa. ISAR Institute gathers feedback from a wide range of workers, not just the most vocal. What is the process to ensure that you are capturing feedback from all workers?
No, I mean, I think that this is a great question, and for us, a lot of the different independent means of verification that our business partners really rely on for us, and the workers do too, is a kind of real thorough cross-check and verification of what's going on. The good news is, and what's been easy for us so far, is that most of us have been operating in Southeast Asia for so long that we have these very kind of long-term ties with communities. For example, like the Burmese migrant community, some of these folks have worked in Thailand, Malaysia for a while, come back to Thailand. I mean, there's been people where we've, helped, rescue their sisters or brothers in the old days, and then now 10 years on, they end up on a fishing boat coming back. I mean, it's a population of millions, but there's a lot of depth that has been built with some of these migrant, populations over time. So I think that understanding how to really sort of cross-check and verify, how to engage, for example, with, if people are working in, some of these large factories, there could be hundreds of thousands of workers. There are a lot of different departments and lines. There's a lot of different lines of supervision where, some may have, forced labor risks that others don't. And so, we need to spend a lot of time on the ground as well. I think that Antoine touched on a point earlier that totally, resonated with me, is that there has to be an iterative approach to getting information and cross-checking and verifying, because what you may hear in the beginning, it usually turns into something, shifting a little bit different or going a little bit deeper or whatever in the end. And, the nice thing about being able to, for us, we're able to have a solutions approach because we're here on the ground, we can work with businesses on improvements. Once you really kind of demonstrate to workers that if they raise an issue with you, that you can actually work with their employer and to drive improvements, they start trusting you more, they start having confidence that their voice counts, and then all of a sudden we just, get flooded with so many more calls from folks, across the community, maybe about these particular workplaces of interest or about others, in the vicinity as well. And so I think that it is this, this constant attention to, data integrity, responsiveness, checks and cross-checks for verification, but, having to respond in a timely manner and, work with the businesses in a way to really kind of drive solutions or make things change, where it really sort of opens up all the different channels of information that we can get, and then having the team on the ground who know how to investigate these matters as labor professionals.
There's a question for Antoine, and that's about using social media analysis. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the innovative work you've done in taking a look at social media to both collect information but also verify information you're getting from workers?
In terms of I mean, we can pull in information from mainstream social media, and what we use that for is to take a first look at hotspots, or define canvas an area where we see that there are problems, and map out maybe interactions between stakeholders. So one thing is we've done some ideas of around mining social conflicts and hotspots in Peru that pulled in millions of records from Twitter and based an index on that. That's helpful to really get a first look at potential problems. Where we haven't found as much promise yet, but we're working on it, is the triangulation of that information with at site level. I think having statistical robustness, or being able to make assertions at that level. I think you can get anecdotal evidence. It's one thing, but more than that, it's another. So that's another issue where I think there is potential for social media is that it can help us identify attempts to falsify our system. So we can cross-check certain things in terms of verifying. Because Facebook, for instance, relies on phone numbers as identifiers. So there are things that one can do to see whether there are attempts to game the system and to provide information that would be inaccurate. So there are a number of things that we do that are more like trying to make sure that the integrity of our tool is there. Getting insights from the open social media is another thing. The last point is where we see a big potential is, at the end of the day, as I said, we do a lot of IDR, and it's not expensive, but it's not free either. So there is a big potential in our view in investing more into data collection through some of the social media, because if we can really reduce the cost of marginal data collection, then we increase the scalability of that. And so that's what we have in our system, and we can enable to really scale faster. But that's less in terms of triangulation. It's more in terms of trying to have a more agnostic and scalable tool to reach the workers.
Great, thank you. I'm looking forward to all the continued work you do in that space and hearing about it. If you have more questions, we'll take a couple more questions, so please send them in, and we'll compile them and ask them to the presenters. I have another question for any one of you, so feel free to jump in, whoever would like to. And that's more about best practices and advice on corporate engagement. How have you been able to build relationships and build trust amongst corporations, and either in partnership with them or compel them to use the data and act upon it? And if you have any anecdotes of success cases where from A to Z, corporate engagement and collecting worker voice and closing the feedback loop where those worker voices get acted upon in a multi-stakeholder way. If anyone can give some best practices and insight into that.
I don't know how to raise my hand. Could I? This is Lisa.
Go for it, Lisa.
Okay, cool, thanks. I think one of the keys that we have with corporate engagement is, I guess we sort of approach it in terms of seeing them as, for us, they're an essential part of the solution, right? And there are a few things that we have to really, really respect. One is the confidentiality of their supply chain data, and in the management of the information about what we're seeing in their supply chain, and how their suppliers are responding and all of that. So we have a lot of really strict protocols in the reporting of the issues that we're seeing from the suppliers in their supply chain, and the responsiveness and how the risks are changing over time and all that. The other, though, is a no name and shame policy. In anti-trafficking, there's a range of different ways that some of the folks in the anti-trafficking sector engage with corporates. There's a lot of different ways to move them. And there's obviously an essential role for advocacy, but for us, we are like not an advocacy organization. We have kind of, some firewalls between us and folks who essentially see the people who are our partners as targets. Now, whether or not, I think that there's, like I said, there's roles for, all of these different, different kinds of functions within anti-trafficking or responsible sourcing. But for us, we have a pretty strict no name and shame policy. Whatever we find and however, quickly the responses are, we do not, go to the media. We never say things like, if you don't do X, Y, Z, we're going to, go to the media to try to encourage movement of pressure, because for as much as that can get different kinds of responses for different, levels or types of businesses, we really want to kind of, maximize our position on the ground as being able to be kind of, like the solutions guys. We can actually really work with and grapple with the complex, exploitative recruitment mechanisms that we see, the suppliers needing to build their capacity, strengthen their systems, formalize and professionalize, their human resource systems, essentially weaknesses which are amounting to forced labor and exploitation. And so in being quite strict about the confidentiality and respect about that kind of data, and then our no name and shame policy, we've actually had, we have really great productive relationships with the corporates that we're partnered with.
Great, thanks. I have a question for David. David, obviously, it's not just private corporate supply chains, it's government supply chains that are impacted by trafficking as well. And there's a few laws and a few executive orders that try to ensure that at least the U.S. government is monitoring its supply chain for human trafficking and making sure it's not entering into the country or whatever's produced domestically as well. You obviously do a lot of work and have a trusted platform that governments, I'm assuming both state and local and federal, use. Do you see an opportunity in leveraging this and other emerging technology to help governments, the U.S. government specifically, also share information and collaborate on finding out and ridding their supply chains of forced labor and trafficking?
Absolutely, absolutely. For us and the Babson students on the phone can appreciate, in a startup environment, it's just about time and resources. We focused our mission on facilitating effective collaboration and communication. From a policy perspective, we've been very focused on information sharing environments and the need for secure information flow. As far as the government workflow for government, it's a huge opportunity for us. And in my previous, career, something that we always were trying to get government contracts to help vet supply chains and, as I said, vendors and suppliers. For us, it's just a process. The immediate need that we solve is, replacing email, for instance. So as far as getting into a policy role in helping to facilitate, global communication up and down a government supply chain, it just is going to take time for us. It just hasn't been our role to date.
Great, thank you. I think, unless there are any other burning questions, which I don't see, I don't think they are, I'm going to ask the participants to make closing remarks. And why don't we start with Antoine?
Thanks for the rich discussion. I mean, I feel, I wanted to touch on, this idea of, how do we create systemic change? Which Lisa just spoke about. And really, we see our role as being very humble in trying to, provide the tools for the activists, organizations, governments, and corporations in the field to do that, and to have data that they can take action on. And we feel that there are some, the technology today can enable to create a more incentive compatible system by providing ways to get the right information to the right people without compromising the anonymity of workers or the no naming and shaming. I think that Lisa alluded to is also critical to change. At the end of the day, I feel that the value proposition that we're trying to have is also to bring on board the suppliers and not just to have to create a system where they're just being at the wrong end of our attention. and not make assumptions that they are always trying to dodge the system by providing tools that are helping them to comply with buyers' norms and demands, but also trying to create value at the end. We feel that there is a growing awareness and I think evidence for the business case for better working conditions, which has been I think pushed also by the ILO Better Work program, and we feel that tools can help detect the human trafficking, but we can really also broaden the conversation and bring on suppliers to help them engage with their employees and link these issues to productivity, business performance, so that the conversation can really get to a different stage, and it doesn't, it really brings everyone along. And obviously, yeah, we feel that technology has a big role to play, but at the same time, it's really no substitute for all the amazing passion and I think professionalism that we see in our partners across the globe. So it's a sobering thought that we always have that we're just at full, but I feel it has great potential, and I think the field is really ripe for more transformation. So we are extremely hopeful and excited to be collaborating with people around this call and elsewhere. So thanks for the attention and the question today.
Thank you, Antoine. Lisa, why don't we hear from you for some closing remarks?
Lucky me, I get to follow Antoine, who already said so many things that I think I absolutely agree with. Now is a great time for everything that we're all doing, whether we identify ourselves as anti-trafficking or labor folks or responsible sourcing and ethical sourcing. It's really a great time for us to come together because, the world has sort of fast-forwarded to being a place where the millions of workers at the bottom of supply chains really do have if you can build the platform for them to be able to share the information and handle the information responsibly and make sure that it's something that they get a response from what they're sharing, and it's not just an extraction of information, but it is really kind of a meaningful exchange that can lead to an improvement in their life. We have opportunities, for all of us folks trying to figure out how to work together now. We really did not have these, opportunities 5 years ago. And so, I think that I'm looking forward to seeing, Babson and Global Initiative, maybe hosting this in another year or two, and we can all see all the different, progress that's been made. But certainly there's a lot of, there's an acceleration and a pace in what's happening in this space that we really don't see in a lot of other areas of anti-trafficking that I think really is quite promising.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. David?
Because I think that's very well said. For us, our goal is to help facilitate communication, collaboration, even amongst this group, for both the participants, those listening now, and those that will ultimately listen to this recording. How do you effectively take this conversation into an active form of collaboration year-round, where you could both share your findings in a secure, private way, and similarly that law enforcement and others can coordinate and collaborate on task forces as they do on our platform today. So we're just attacking it from a different angle, providing tools to enable more effective outcomes, and look forward to working with this group and others in the future to help do that.
Good, and thank you again to Antoine and Lisa, and I think you all deserve a virtual standing ovation. So just imagine, 80+ people standing up in their individual rooms and clapping. So thank you for that. It was very insightful. We learned a lot about both data collection analysis and some innovative uses of technology to collect data not just from workers, but from other sources about labor conditions and supply chains. We learned a lot about data sharing and collaboration across platforms and geographies and some of the policy considerations around that. And then I think we also heard some very good information about how to work with stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, including governments and businesses, to actually use that data to drive improvements on the ground and respect workers for their rights. Thank you for the sponsors and Babson College for hosting this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Thank you so much, Samir, and thank you to all of our presenters for this dynamic discussion today. I think it was an extraordinary conversation, and I know that the global audience that we maintained for most of the 2 hours is extremely appreciative for the information that you shared. So thank you for your work in the field and everything that you're doing to innovate each and every day. So I wanted to just make an announcement about our next global online webinar, Multi-Technology Brands and Tackling Human Trafficking, which will be on Thursday, February 23rd, 2017 from 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 to 6 o'clock p.m. Central European Time, and we hope that you'll join us for that. And for more information on this webinar and to register and to sign up also for the other webinars in the series, please go to the Global Initiative website at www.globalinitiative.net. And again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank our technical administrators here at Babson, John Florendo and Zach, who is here with me administering and also working on any technological issues that we've experienced. But we've actually had very few, so we're thrilled with that. So again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you join next time. Have a wonderful rest of the day and evening. Take care. Bye-bye.